This is now. What do you think the future's going to be like? Is this how we want to order games? Is this how we're going to get our gaming fix? Good morning, friends, and this is the Cold Takes podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about the possibility that we may be in the end of the physical game era. How did we get here, and how can we fix it? Let's dive into it. I took those pictures just the other night at work. It is the post-holiday time, and it is possible that maybe Nintendo and Sony and maybe even Microsoft are having trouble keeping up with restocking stores for their basic video games. But I don't actually think that's what it is. I think this may be, as I said, the end of the physical video game era. It seems that modern video game companies seem to have the idea that the demand for physical games is much less than it actually is. We see soaring sales for online stores, whether it's Steam, the Nintendo eShop, PlayStation Network, and the companies only have the feedback that we give them. And how do we give that feedback? Well, we give that feedback with the money we spend with those companies. So, if the majority of our money is going into digital sales, those companies will continue to have releases like the upcoming Mask of the Lunar Eclipse for the Switch that will be only digital. And yes, you can go out of your way and go through foreign game sellers, you can go through VGP, and you can pay a premium to get the game you want on a basic cart or disc. You are going to pay a premium to get the game you want on a basic cart or disc. No, I didn't mistakenly repeat myself. That is so important, it bears repeating. We are going to pay a premium for a game on a basic cart or disc. That sounds like lunacy. How am I going to pay $10, $20, $30, $40 more for a game that is not a special edition? It does not have extras. It does not have any kind of DLC. It is the basic release of the game. It is that digital game put onto a cart or disc, and you are paying a premium for it. That is problematic. That is somewhere we don't want to go. That's somewhere I'm uncomfortable being. You all know my history. I love to brag and boast that I do most of my game hunting out in the wild. That means GameStop, Walmart, Target, Best Buy. It means pawn shops. It means Salvation Army, Goodwill, Savers. Those are my haunts. Yard sales, garage sales. I love the thrill of picking up a game in my hands after I've traveled to said location to search for hidden treasure. And many times, you'll find a whole bunch of shovelware releases or common games that are overpriced or priced at retail, and you'll pass on them. But every once in a while, you'll find a great hidden gem, or you'll find a game that had a short production run and you were lucky to find at all, or at a great discounted price. That is something that soon is going to go the way of the dinosaur. Because with our habits, we are driving video game manufacturers away from producing physical discs and carts. And it's not only buying the games digitally on the stores. It is our addiction to the FOMO websites, things like PlayAsia, things like VGP, that are, once again, charging a premium for what was once considered a basic video game. So, how did we get here? What's happened that has caused this? Well, I personally blame these websites. Limited run games is the bane of the video game industry. I have long said that limited run games takes many indie titles, and God, I do love indie games. Do not get me wrong. I am one of the hugest fans of indie games. My PS4, my PS3, my Switch are filled with them. But some of the things that I see, and I would even say the majority of the things that I see on LRG, are terrible. They are extremely overpriced for what you're getting. But again, you are literally paying that premium to have that game in your hands. And a lot of the things on Limited Run come with a card, a trading card, some little map. Not things that I would consider incredible extras. Yes, there's, I'm sure, exorbitant collector's editions that you can get, but most of them aren't coming with like a fancy statue that has like a 5,000 print run or anything like that. And some of them say that they're rare and that they're a limited quantity. That's until they decide to reprint them. So we are basically switching over to a third-party print-on-demand industry. Now, the first-party publishers have always been print-on-demand. They own these titles, they own the rights to them, and if the new Mario game only had so much of the game produced, and it's phenomenally popular and it's selling well, Nintendo would choose to print more. That's something we were always used to. The games, though they may retain a high value retail-wise, they're never really going to go up in price because they'll only produce more or the same amount. The problem is that these games are claimed to be rare. They are claimed to be limited. Though it may not be LRG, let's look at what happened with Square in these Pixel remasters. So they do a drive-by overnight release of them, and they immediately sell out. But most people did not have a fair shake at it. People get upset. Square hears this. Now, because we have a even more print-on-demand industry, Square, just a few days later, releases another batch of the same game. Now, if you bought that game and you bought it because you thought it was going to be limited, they have immediately changed the quantity of the game that will be printed in reaction to the reaction that their fans had. How does that make sense? It makes business sense for Square because there's no overhead risk. They don't have to print a whole bunch of games ahead of time and worry about whether they'll sell them, and worry about shipping them to stores, and worry about what to do with overstock. They never have to worry about that. Yeah, they are a first-party publisher, but LRG, PlayAsia, they have none of those worries either, because they will print them in the quantities that they feel will be demanded, and only demanded. And they will only print more if you demand more. That will greatly affect the quantity of the game that is in the wild. That will greatly affect the value of that game. How does that make sense? We are literally switching over to, whether it's first party or third party, print on demand industry. That is bad. That means that Target and Walmart will not have games on their shelves. That means that you will not get to peruse the game section at your local department store. That means as less and less physical games are printed, because they're only printed in special limited quantities by these special limited websites, that less games will be traded into places like GameStop. And when you go to GameStop, those shelves of the pre-owned games will be empty or only filled with exorbitantly priced garbage that has had its value and quantity dictated by scalpers and wildly fluctuating quantities that are printed. That's not a future that I want to be part of. So what happened? So as we continue to show a habit towards digital games, and we continue to play into the hands of the FOMO crowd and the companies that push that mentality, it becomes a clear business decision for any publisher to release their game that they just put out, they put all this hard work and development into, digitally with no risk, or through third-party websites like LRG and VGP with limited liability and risk. So they keep all their profits and we get less games. The traditional advice that you would give in this situation is to vote with your dollar. But let's go back to those Final Fantasy Pixel remasters. So I know that the first thing that crossed my mind when I stared at that screen, and I worked third shift. I could have got that. I was there at the time. And I looked away because I thought it was ridiculous. The first thought that crossed my mind was, I'll be able to get these digitally, individually, cheaper. I don't need to partake in this. So if I want to vote with my dollar, now my options are reduced to two things. I can take part in the FOMO mentality, which I'm very much against, or I can buy only digitally, which I'm very much against. A game or a set of games, this epic, this beloved, this important to the history of role-playing games, the history of games in general, and the history of Square Enix, did not get a basic retail release. Now, a lot of you ordered it, and I don't hold that against you. It is your money. You are absolutely free to do with it what you want. I would never judge you for your purchases. I buy exorbitant things all the time, whether it's games or figures or other various things. But this is just a bad situation, because while your attention may be taken away by the, I'm sure, awesome $250 collector's edition you just bought, too many people are not focusing on the fact that a game this legendary, this important, is not going to be available to the mass public. It's not going to be something you can just pick up at GameStop or Target. It's not going to be something that you're going to find at a yard sale in a couple of years. It has literally been gate-kept by Square Enix in the name of the fear of missing out. And that's what bothers me about it. And what bothers me about it is it sets a huge precedent. Because like I said, this isn't like a lost entry in the Atelier series. This isn't like Atelier Annie 3 that was some unreleased game that never came to North American shores. These are historically significant games that will not be available to the average consumer. And that's sad. That's more sad than anything. And that's a tough thing to look at, because, like I said, this is precedence. So the next time, let's say one of the things that people have dreamed about, let's say we're all hoping for Capcom to release Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 in their original glory. When they see what happened with Square, why wouldn't they just do a super special edition, overnight drive-by release of it, have the option to release more if they want to release more, to sell to you at exorbitant amounts of money with exorbitant unfair shipping costs? Games that important should be available on the mass market. And whether or not you love collector's editions, or whether or not you're a physical game collector that loves things that are rare, those games shouldn't be rare. They should be available for everybody. And the fact that this sets a precedent, and in the future, releases like this may not be available to everybody, this is just like I said, it's very sad. We're not going to see any more God of War compilations or Devil May Cry compilations like we had on the PS3 and PS4 because of what just happened. I honestly don't think that most people realize the significance of what is occurring in this industry because they are wrapped up in the excitement for these releases. I really hope that everyone is listening, because we have to vote with our dollar, and that's going to be hard, because in a situation like the Square Enix situation, voting with your dollar means not buying them at all. It means that if I want to play those, I'm going to have to dig up my original retro copies, or I'm going to have to play the remasters and remakes that they had on like the DS or the PS1. I'm going to have to skip on this completely. I'm going to have to miss out because of the fear of missing out. That sucks. And we are back. So, folks, I just spent the last couple hours talking to a couple of real close friends about the subject and kind of about how it affects different people differently. So, I am fully aware that I am from a time in game collecting that was much different, where online sales were not as pervasive and popular, where there was still a lot of magic in the old style videos you see on YouTube of guys like Game Chasers and Retro Rick getting out there and finding hidden gems, finding incredible deals in thrift stores and at game stores. That's kind of where I came up from. In all transparency, I started Cold Nights actually as an eBay store. I used to really enjoy going out picking a couple times a week. We would go out and buy plushes, action figures, toys, video games, books, movies, basically anything pop culture or entertainment, and try to resell it for a quick buck. Very often we were not successful, but sometimes we were very successful. As my main career with Walmart took off, I actually walked away from that. I did not have the time to run an eBay store anymore. So I kind of stopped the selling, but kept the habits of buying and going out and picking and seeing what I could discover. Because to me, that really wasn't work. That was something I really enjoyed doing, and there was an added bonus in the fact that I could find incredibly rare and valuable things. I'm not going to take this time to go over all the stuff that I ever found, but I am going to tell you that there was a certain joy that I haven't felt doing anything else when I would walk into one of those stores and see a large row of like PS2 games or Xbox games, or even some like retro stuff, like some Super Nintendo cards or N64 cards. And there was trepidation when I walked up to the glass case where they would keep any of the nicer things that they took in at the thrift store or the pawn shop. Those were really exciting. And it's come to my realization that there's a lot of collectors, and I mean exquisite collectors, people that run incredible channels that have incredible analysis on how to collect, and they've never done that. And that's not judgment on them. They have a completely new way of collecting that they enjoy. And I've come to realize that these people enjoy sitting at the computer or on their phones and looking for incredible deals and finding things on discounts and finding things that have been re-released. And for them, that holds the same magic as me walking into a pawn shop or a Goodwill or the local Target to see what's on clearance. So I definitely have had my horizons broadened quite a bit through my experience on YouTube and Twitter, talking to all these different folks, and especially today, talking about how these different things that I mentioned in the first half of the podcast come off to people that have a different style of collecting. And though they may bother some of these people, they definitely don't take it to heart as much as I do, because I am at one point was a collector that focused exclusively on the resale value. And even after I stopped running a resale shop, it still was a point of pride how valuable my collection is, or for me to be able to tell people that I got something incredible for pennies on the dollar. So when I see things like re-releases, when I see things like extra quantities released. For instance, one of the things that I spoke to somebody about this morning was blue reflection. And I actually openly admit that when they released that info, that they were having another limited print of it, I was furious. And I know that might sound bitter or jealous, but you have to see where I'm coming from. When I found that game close to its release, maybe even day one, I honestly don't remember, I found it in GameStop, and I saw it was a game from Gust that was definitely in a niche genre. It was a magical girl turn-based RPG. And I said, it looks like they only got one copy of this. This is not going to be a popular game. It's not going to be printed very much. And I should pick this up because it's going to retain future value. Did I plan to play it? Maybe. Did I end up playing it? Yes. Do I actually think it's a great game? Not at all, actually. I don't want to ruin anyone's fun. But I was not a fan of it, but it's certainly not anything near any of the AAA RPGs or even some of the great indie ones we've seen recently. But for me, when I saw that release, honestly, I should feel happy that other people are going to get to experience it. And just being transparent and honest, I wasn't. Because for me, that was an affront to the work and decisions that I had made to get that game and the things that went into curating my collection. And I realize now that the joy that people will have at being able to get that and the joy they had waiting to see if they could get an order through on the website may have been equivalent to the joy that I had when I first picked it up. So, not that my opinion has changed on this, all right, but I have talked to some important people in my life over the last day, and I have realized that there is another side to this coin. So I can honestly tell you that I do still feel like sooner than later we will see a vast reduction or an end to physical games. But that doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to turn into something ugly. This is going to turn into something that a new generation of collectors can enjoy in their own special way. And in all honesty, who am I to rain on that parade? So I can tell you that I'm saddened that I don't have 3 full aisles of systems, peripherals, controllers, and games and merchandise to shop at Target and Walmart. But the joy that people are feeling when they go to VGP and try to put in a pre-order, when they go to Square Enix and try to get a collector's edition, well, if that is that special to them, then I fully recognize that. And if I came off as bitter, well, the old dinosaur Indiana Jones collector in me is. But for a person who is a lover of video games and a lover of the content that so many of my friends make on YouTube about video games, I'm happy that they're experiencing this. And though I may not understand it or fully embrace their style of collecting, it's valid and it's something that brings them joy. So I have to try to continue to make my space in this game collecting world and try to get my enjoyment still. I can still go to GameStop. I can still hit up the thrift stores and the pawn shops. And even though things might be looking a little slimmer than they used to, you guys do see when I post things on Twitter, I do find nice things. And honestly, what someone pointed out to me when I was talking to them, my collection is very large and it's already very valuable. And maybe it's time to admit that the time of getting something for nothing or free lunch is over. And maybe I need to start brushing up on some of the techniques that the newer collectors are using to curate their collections. And you know what? I'm going to try to do that. It's very hard for me. I very much am someone who is taken in the moment by seeing these items in front of me and holding them in my hands. But again, talking to people, they get that same feeling looking at a great sale online. Or that same excitement when a game is re-released that they never thought they'd be able to get without paying a scalper's price. That is the same joy that I get when I see a $100 PS2 game for $10 at Goodwill. I don't have to pay a scalper's price, and I got something special for a great deal. So I still have a vast amount of concerns with the way the industry is going, but I have had my eyes opened a little bit to what other people are doing to combat this and also keep the joy in their collecting. So I'm going to make it a conscious effort to try to participate in these alternate ways of collecting, more analysis driven, shopping around. I know I'm kind of like a person that's paranoid and fearful of buying things online, but I'm honestly missing out. I was listing off recent games and upcoming releases to one of my friends that I'm probably not going to get because I refuse to deal with these companies or deal with mainly online marketplaces. And if I do really end up missing out on those, honestly, as much as I want to blame other companies or the situation, that's on me. And though I wish the situation was different and I could find these games at my local GameStop or at Walmart, I do have to adapt with the times. So, is the end of physical game collecting here? No. But maybe there is going to be a change in how it's done. And maybe that's not a bad thing. I really hope that's true. I thank you for listening. And as always, stay creepy.